This is lecture 12. I call it the Classical Age. This runs chronologically from about 1000 BCE, before the Common Era, to about 550 CE, the Common Era. Great traditions are formed during this time in the river valley civilizations that we've already discussed in China, India, the Mediterranean, Persia, and then, of course, in the Middle Kingdom in China, south of the Yellow River. Let's talk about the focus here. In Western civilization courses, we tend to focus on Greece and Rome. In world history courses, our focus broadens to include China and India and other places. The classical world is not the entire world yet. The human web has not expanded that far. Let's talk about classical China here for a moment, just some characterizations. There's a transition here from a decentralized sort of landlord-dominated territory to a more centralized state run by the Han dynasty. And again, refer back to bureaucracy that we talked about earlier. This China's large bureaucracy created a very strong state. They instituted a training system for government officials. There was a great deal of trade in ancient China, both within the country and along its periphery. And remember the Confucian cultural bias in China against merchants. This creates tension in Chinese history because of the Confucian contempt for money-making, and then, of course, the natural inclination of merchants to make money. We see this tension continues into the 21st century. Remember also that China had great success with technology over the centuries. I think you can make the argument up until the 15th century, 16th century, that China was easily the most technologically advanced civilization on Earth. After Columbus's voyages, there will be a shift in power here, where Europe will gain a technological advantage. Chinese inventions would spread across Eurasia. Think about gunpowder, paper, the compass, and other things. A couple of characterizations of classical India here as we move west. There's an in-migration of Aryan herding people, nomadic peoples, from the steppe lands of Central Asia, southward into what today we would call India. These Aryans brought elaborate religious stories with them. They settled in India, creating later the Mauryan Empire, and then after that the Gupta Empire. The Indian state is less centralized than the Chinese state. There's less emphasis on political ideas in India, and there's more emphasis on religion. The caste system is created, and it determines a sort of social status in Indian society, determining who you would marry, for instance, or what careers are open to you. So when we compare China and India, think about the scientific tradition in both civilizations is strong. China more secular, India more clerical. Think about Brahmanism, Hinduism, Buddhism. These things arise in India. And of course in China you have Confucianism and Taoism. Even Chinese religions, if you want to call them that, tend to be more ethical systems, how to treat people, the relationships among people, as opposed to the Indian religions, which have a wide variety of deities. Let's continue westward to Persia. In the 5th and 6th centuries before the Common Era, we have elaborate transportation systems. We have postal service, roads for travel and trade. Persia, of course, will advance westward and challenge Egypt and Greece. In the 3rd century before the Common Era, of course, Persia will be overshadowed by Alexander the Great and the spread of Greek or Hellenistic culture in Persia. And then later, of course, Persia will be overshadowed by Islam, as Islam erupts out of Arabia and then moves north and east into Persia. Let's continue moving west to the classical Mediterranean. Here we see there's a strong Egyptian influence on Greece. We see Greek colonies scattered throughout the Mediterranean. When we shift to the Romans, we see a change from the Roman Republic, where power is dispersed, to the Roman Empire, where power is held in the hands of very few. In the Mediterranean, we see the society stressing politics and legal systems as unifying agents. There's slavery included, a wide variety of slave institutions. In the Mediterranean, we see a distinct hierarchy, societies of deference and reciprocity. And of course, in the Mediterranean is perhaps the least technologically developed. Some historians think this may be due to the fact that slavery was widespread, and when you have slaves to do the work, there's no incentive for innovation. Let's talk about expansion and cohesion here among these classical societies. We'll talk about a couple of institutions. Trade linked these classical empires together. In China, for instance, the wheat-growing areas in North China along the Yellow River are now going to be connected to the rice-growing areas in southern China along the Yangtze River. In Rome, we link the empire to Egypt and to Sicily, which are very good for grain growing, for wheat, to supply bread for the empire. Other key cultural institutions, we've mentioned Confucianism in China, Hinduism in India. In Greece and Rome, we have artistic traditions which tend to unify people in a common culture. And another integrative device I'm going to mention here is political unity through empire. People begin to think of themselves as belonging to this larger organized state. A little more detail. I'm going to go a little further here and talk about these civilizations. I'm going to start with India. The Harappan civilization was abandoned about the time that the Aryan invaders came into the Indus River Valley. This is about 1500 before the Common Era. We don't know what caused this demise. Was it drought? Was it invasions? Floods? Disease? We're not sure. We do see the rise of the caste system brought in by the Aryans, people grouped by birth and occupation. Key term here is karma. You guys have heard this word. Everyone's expected to be reborn up or down the scale of existence, depending on one's karma, that is, on how well each re-embodied human soul had previously conformed to the roles befitting its caste. Ritual contamination restricted contact among the caste. Marriage was confined to people of the same caste. You did not marry up or down. Other key terms here, the four varnas. Varnas designating occupation and placement on the hierarchy of the caste. You have priests, warriors, merchants, and everybody else. Also, you see in India deference accorded to ascetics who had access to a transcendental spiritual realm. Ascetics are those people who have rejected the material world. We see them in Christianity and Islam. We see them in Buddhism and Hinduism. And quite often, ascetics are given great respect because of their self-suffering and their rejection of the pleasures of the material world, in that they devote their entire existence to the worship of God. Buddha himself, we believe he died about 483 before the Common Era. We talk about him in a little bit of detail here. The Buddhists, of course, sought to free themselves from the suffering inherent in bodily existence by annihilating the self and attaining nirvana. So the Buddhists, what they're essentially saying is that suffering is the source of all desire is the source of all suffering. So if you eliminate desire, you eliminate human suffering. Buddhism is a very successful missionary religion. In the Mira dynasty, about 321 of the Common Era, it was the first really organized state to control all of northern India. it was faced with continual challenges by the steppe raiders coming in from Central Asia. We've already talked about the Aryans a moment ago. So Indian influence across Eurasia is primarily religious and then secondarily commercial. A couple of words here about the Chinese civilization. The Zhou dynasty, what the time period here, about 1100 to about 256 before the Common Era. Here you see extensive diking and drainage systems to bring these vast floodplains under cultivation so that wheat and rice can be raised. You have the rise of Confucianism. Confucius, of course, not unusually, this is a common theme. He evoked the example of a more perfect, stable, pristine past that the people could look back to try to reattain in their own lifetimes. Confucius taught about the proper way to live. Gentlemen should maintain good relations with the spirits by acting with proper decorum, both in their private life and as imperial officials. We see in China defensive walls are going to now be built on the northern frontier. This is to keep nomadic horsemen out of China. We'll talk about the Mongols later. Sometimes these walls are successful and sometimes they're not. We see caravan trade that links China to the rest of Eurasia. And then we see Chinese ideas and techniques and diseases and crops and other novelties spread from China across Eurasia. And then a couple of words here about Greece. Polis, P-O-L-I-S, is a distinctly Greek way of organizing society. Of course, polis is the root of many of our words. Polis, the city-state in Greece, it combined the advantages of tribal and village solidarity with the skills and wealth of urban civilization. It lasted only a few centuries. Its the primary institution that afforded Greek citizenship and equality was the phalanx, the organized military unit comprised of individual hoplites. These are individual Greek artisans and farmers who equip themselves and then fight in the phalanx for the common good of Greece or for the Greek city-states. Of course, the Greek victory over the expanding Persian Empire is a clear, decisive moment in Western history as Persia's expansion ends and the Greek city-states survive. There's no authoritative priesthood in Greece. There are many gods. You're aware of the pantheon of Greek gods in mythology, Zeus and so on. And then, of course, Alexander will spread Greek culture, or Hellenistic culture, eastward into the Middle East, Persia, Afghanistan, North Africa. And then just a couple of words about Rome here in this time period. Of course, Rome will conquer Greece. What are my dates here? 215 to 146 before the Common Era. Rome had earlier conquered Carthage in what we call the Punic Wars, thereby establishing Roman dominance over the Mediterranean. And of course, Greek and Roman literature borrowed from each other, and they preserved these ideas of freedom and citizenship long after the end of the Roman Empire. Even our founding fathers in constructing our Constitution draw on ancient Roman philosophy and political philosophy especially. Christian churches created a new identity and community for the poor and oppressed. Of course, this takes place in the context of the Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire and the Han Chinese empires both suffered catastrophic epidemics that reduced their populations significantly. This happens at about the same time on the eastern end of Eurasia and the western end of Eurasia. Now, this ever-tightening human web is responsible for these disasters because people can now mix and intermingle with each other and travel, spreading not only trade items, but diseases as they go. Travelers and armies extend infections across regional borders and introduce diseases to new populations, those populations without immunity. A couple of conclusions. Classical achievements would be remembered by their respective societies, as models to follow in the future. And of course, the human web is now expanded across Eurasia, linking these distinct civilizations through trade, religion, and disease. Thank you.